After a massive gate appears in Japan, all the guild masters of the major guilds are summoned to discuss how to handle the situation. During the meeting, one of the guild masters notices all the S-rank hunters from the Blade Guild arriving and mentions that after the death of Goto Ryuji, Sugimoto has taken over as the guild master. Other guild members remark that the Blade Guild lost 7 S-rank hunters during the Jeju Island raid and blame the Japanese Hunters Association chairman Matsumoto for his crooked scheme to annihilate all the Korean S-rank hunters. Instead of succeeding, the plan backfired and severely weakened the Blade Guild. Another guildmaster comments that the Blade Guild's days are numbered. Sugimoto overhears these remarks and stops in his tracks and thinks to himself that if they play their cards right, they might still have a chance to become the greatest guild in Japan. The Blade Guild members turn and glare at the other guild masters with death stares, which causes them to tremble and decide to leave. Minoru comments with irritation that the other guild masters cannot even look them in the eyes, and adds that after losing Goto Ryuji, that other guilds have become arrogant, and mentions hearing a rumor that the Phantom Guild is trying to acquire the Snowy Mountain Guild. Kanai responds that if the rumor is true, the Phantom Guild would have 4 S-rank hunters, just like the Blade Guild. Sugimoto confidently dismisses the idea that merging guilds would not make them the strongest guild in Japan. He calls their attempt ridiculous and explains that even if all the other guilds in Japan combined forces, they would still be no match for the Blade Guild. As the guild members begin their meeting, the Prime Minister furiously demands to know why the Hunters Association has not addressed the S-rank gate that has spawned in the heart of Tokyo. He questions why there are no countermeasures in place and warns them to tell the truth about what they plan to do if a dungeon break occurs. One of the guild masters reveals the harsh reality that their S-rank hunters are not strong enough to handle the gate, but suggests that national-level hunters might have a chance. Another member requests the Prime Minister to stop asking obvious questions and uses the Jeju Island raid as an example to point out that the outcome is already clear if they fight with their S-rank hunters. Another guildmaster responds that pessimistic remarks will not help and urges them to come up with concrete plans and suggests hiring Thomas Andre for the mission. Another guildmaster comments that the country does not have enough funds to recruit Thomas Andre and explains that they are currently searching for available hunters around the world. However, with the sudden spike in the number of gates, only a few countries are willing to send their hunters. The Prime Minister then asks how many hunters are willing to tackle the S-rank gate, and Sugimoto mentions that there is one hunter who is willing to help as long as he gets paid, and suggests hiring Yuri Orlov, a barrier specialist, and explains that he plans to bring him in for this mission. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Jinwoo, who is in disbelief as he reflects on reaching level 101 and obtaining the key to the Cartenon Temple at level 100. He thinks about how leveling up to level 101 has improved his skills and looks forward to seeing what happens when he reaches level 102. As he parks his car, he wonders if Jinho is holding up well by himself and feels grateful to have such a motivated guildmaster. He also considers that they definitely need to hire more people for the guild. Suddenly, he notices someone nearby and realizes it is Hae-In. Hae-In tries to leave after spotting Jinwoo, but he uses his dash skill to catch up to her. He questions why she is running away from him. Caught off guard by Jinwoo's sudden approach, Hae-In nervously stops. Jinwoo asks again what she is doing near his office. Hae-In hesitantly explains that she left her car in the parking lot. Jinwoo quickly realizes that Hae-In must have forgotten her car, as they had used his shadow exchange skill to go to the gym at the Hunters Association earlier. Hae-In then asks Jinwoo if he is free. A flood of questions pops into her mind as she wonders why he took a photo with Soo-hyun, if Soo-hyun is really working for their guild, and why Jinwoo hired Soo-hyun but not her, especially since she is an S rank while Soo-hyun is an A rank. However, instead of voicing these thoughts, she decides to ask a different question. She tells Jinwoo that Min Byung-gu wanted her to relay a message to him about his powers. This surprises Jinwoo, and he immediately invites her to come upstairs to his office. As they both enter the office, Hae-In notices that no one else is present and questions Jinwoo about it. Jinwoo explains that the Vice Guild Master is out on business, and Hae-In realizes that it is just the two of them and starts shaking nervously. Jinwoo asks her about the message left by Min Byung-gu, and Hae-In recounts that after she was knocked out on the Jeju Island raid, she heard a voice as Min Byung-gu grabbed her soul and told her to warn Jinwoo. She explains that Min Byung-gu said Jinwoo needs to be careful of the powers within him and mentioned that someone pulled him out of the darkness and that he no longer feels like himself. He was still conscious of his senses, but felt like he had become a slave meant only to serve Jinwoo. And the scariest part was that he felt happy to serve him. Jinwoo is shocked at Min Byung-gu's words about feeling happy to serve Jinwoo. Min Byung-gu also added that Jinwoo's powers are incredibly strong and frightening and requested her to pass this information to him. Meanwhile, during a raid, Jinwoo starts thinking about what Hae-In told him and wonders if she is telling the truth. He decides that finding the source of his powers is far more important than becoming a stronger hunter. Jinho mentions that this raid reminds him of the old days when they used to raid C-rank dungeons, and Jinwoo tells him not to talk with his mouth full while eating food. Jinho then asks why Jinwoo does not let his soldiers handle everything while he takes care of other business. Jinwoo explains that he cannot do that because he is unsure of what his shadows might do without him watching them. The real reason, however, is that Jinwoo gains less experience when he is farther away. Suddenly, one of the ant shadows starts chewing on beast corpses, and Jinho is horrified by the sight. Jinho asks about Jina's well-being and mentions that she has been through a lot. Jinwoo replies that she needs rest for now and assures him that his most trustworthy shadow Beru is looking after her, so she should be fine. Jinwoo decides to check on her himself and uses his shared senses skill to see through his shadows. He first checks on Jina and sees that she is sleeping while Beru is watching period dramas. This completely catches him off guard and wonders if Beru likes period dramas. He realizes this might explain why Beru has started talking in such a peculiar way. Jinwoo then decides to check on others, starting with his mom, and then Baek Yoonho and Choi Jongin, who are arguing. Finally, he accidentally sees Hae-In bathing. Jinwoo starts shaking after seeing this, and for the first time blushes as his face turns red and decides to apologize to her by buying her dinner. Jinho then asks if Jinwoo has heard the news of the S-rank gate in Shinjuku, and mentions that if the gate is not cleared in 3 days, there will be a dungeon break. He adds that Japan is trying to recruit hunters from all over the world to clear the gate, and asks if they have contacted Jinwoo. Jinwoo wonders if it has already been that long since the gate spawned, and replies that he did receive a call, but is still thinking about it, as he has more important matters to attend to. He pulls out the key to the double dungeon, and wonders what kind of answers he will find there, since the request came directly from the system itself. He notes that it will take around 27 more hours to locate the gate, and starts thinking about what the system truly is, and remarks that he has 1 more day to uncover the truth about it. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Yuri Orlov, a Russian S-rank hunter who is known as the best support-type hunter. Yuri mentions that he has reviewed the files about the S-rank gate and calls it a smart decision to evacuate all the citizens. He comments that Japan seems to lack manpower and asks if it is true that they can only send 6 S-rank hunters for this mission. Sugimoto confirms this and explains that 1 S-rank hunter from each guild must stay behind to handle the other A-rank gates that have spawned across Japan, and adds that the same applies to his guild. Yuri responds that this plan will not work and states that he will need a total of $3.6 billion for the mission, which is $10 million per day. Then Sugimoto is stunned upon hearing Yuri demand $10 million per day. Yuri calmly explains that he is only asking for $3.6 billion for a year to save their country, and points out that he is not asking for $36 trillion. He adds that his fee is much lower than what Thomas Andre would charge. Minoru turns to Kanae and wonders if she understands any Russian, and asks what Yuri is saying. Kanae responds that she is not sure, but remarks that the meeting does not sound good. Yuri laughs and poses a question to the group, asking if they would rather spend $10 million a day to become national heroes or give up on their country to save a bit of money. He further emphasizes that with only 3 days left before the dungeon break, they do not have the luxury to pick and choose, and sarcastically suggests they should get on their knees and lick his boots. Sugimoto irritably comments that Yuri seems overly confident in his abilities, and Yuri responds with certainty that he is confident in his strength and declares that he is better than hundreds of the losers standing behind Sugimoto. Minoru realizes that Yuri has just insulted them, and Kanae also remarks that even though she does not understand his words, she can tell he is mocking them. They prepare to attack him, but to their surprise, Yuri creates a barrier around them using his magic. He smugly states that they cannot move even a single inch without his permission, and challenges them to try if they think they can. Both Minoru and Kanae are shocked as they find themselves unable to move, and Kanae remarks that it feels as though someone has tied her up. Yuri confidently declares that he will block the S-rank gate, and as a bonus, he will save their comrades' lives. Sugimoto thanks Yuri for demonstrating his abilities, but mentions that their government might not agree to his offer. As Sugimoto begins trembling, he realizes they have no other choice and takes back his words and decides to make a call to arrange the money. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Jinwoo's apartment as he prepares to leave. His mom notices and asks if there is something she should be worried about, and Jinwoo smiles and reassures her that there is nothing to worry about and that he just has an appointment. Jinwoo pulls out the key to the double dungeon as the location of the gate has finally been revealed. The scene shifts to the school where the great orcs previously attacked. Another gate has appeared, and the association members are relieved that it spawned. Their school is closed, and remark that it would have been a disaster if the students were still at school. One of the members notices Jinwoo walking toward the gate, and he asks her how long the gate has been there. She responds that it has been 3 days since the gate appeared. Jinwoo panics as he realizes he has been misled and recalls that the system notified him it would reveal the location of the gate after a certain period of time, but it did not specify that the gate would appear after this period. He thinks to himself that the gate is probably around C rank and asks if any hunters have already entered. The member replies that a strike squad went in about 2 hours ago, and Jinwoo immediately starts walking toward the gate. The member protests, saying that the gate is only C rank, but Jinwoo insists that the strike squad is in danger and warns that if they do not stop the raid now, everyone inside will die. The member is shocked and demands to know what he means by everyone dying and questions why Jinwoo is doing this, but he replies that there is no time to explain and enters the gate. Upon entering the gate, Jinwoo sees the corpses of magic beasts scattered around and notices the hunters waiting near a door. The hunters are confused and wonder why they cannot open the door and what they should do as their magic spells are not working on it. Suddenly, Jinwoo speaks up and warns them that it is a trap. One of the hunters questions who he is, and Jinwoo replies that he is the one who survived the double dungeon incident. The hunters look at him with puzzled expressions and ask if he is Sung Jinwoo. Jinwoo confirms and warns them that there's a great danger behind the door. He offers to take care of the dungeon and requests them to leave immediately. Jinwoo examines the door and realizes it is locked and wonders if it is sealed by a magic spell. The system notifies him to use the key to open it, and Jinwoo notices that this door is different from the one he encountered before. He uses the key and opens the door, and the hunters are shocked to see him unlock it. One of the hunters points out that the Courage Guild has the permit for this dungeon and argues that Jinwoo has no right to ask them to leave. Jinwoo acknowledges that the hunter is correct and admits that just because he is an S-rank hunter does not mean he has the authority to order them around. He tells them he will not stop them if they wish to continue. One of the hunters steps forward and begins entering the dungeon. The system immediately notifies Jinwoo that someone has entered the gate without permission. A knight statue suddenly comes at him and tries to kill the hunter, but Jinwoo intervenes and saves him. Jinwoo explains to the group that there will be many more statues like this inside and asks if anyone still wants to proceed. He firmly states that all the hunters need to exit the dungeon and contact the association to report the double dungeon. Jinwoo then steps inside and the doors close behind him. The lamps light up just like before, and he finds himself surrounded by statues and sees a statue holding a stone slab with commandments written on it. Jinwoo looks at the statues and recalls his memories of the double dungeon and thinks to himself that this is where everything started. But things are different now. As he is much stronger, he senses that the statues are neither beasts nor living beings and concludes that they are just puppets. Jinwoo notices one statue radiating mana and approaches it and asks the statue if it is the one in control of the dungeon. The statue closes its eyes in response. Jinwoo stops in front of it and questions why it is not answering him and remarks that it is time for the statue to provide him with answers. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Yuri Orlov as he arrives at the airport and everyone immediately starts snapping pictures of him. One of them questions how Yuri plans to block the gate, and Yuri responds confidently that he will use the same strategy he always uses. He explains that he will draw a huge mana circle around the gate and pour his mana into it so nothing can come out of the gate. One of the reporter questions if Yuri is truly capable of blocking an S-rank gate all by himself and remarks that the public is not fully supportive of this decision. Yuri smirks and responds that it is impossible for him to block the barrier alone, and further explains that his magic circles have the ability to draw mana from their surroundings, and by using this ability, he will place large quantities of mana crystals around the circle, which the magic circle will absorb. He simplifies it with an example, saying it is like starting a car, and once the barrier is activated, it will transform into a sturdy wall by continuously sucking up mana. Yuri concludes confidently that he will save lives and requests the public to remember his gesture. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Chairman Go, who is watching Yuri's interview. He comments that he is not confident Yuri can block an S-rank gate and remarks that he knows exactly what will happen if Yuri fails. Chairman Go then asks Manager Woo what Jinwoo is currently doing. Manager Woo responds that Jinwoo is raiding gates and hands the chairman a list of gates. Manager Woo mentions that Ajin Guild has requested entry permits for all the gates marked on the list and adds that these gates are in districts managed by other major guilds, which might create friction between them. Chairman Go smiles proudly and praises Jinwoo, calling the one-man guild as strong as a major guild and finds it amusing. Manager Woo agrees with the chairman. The chairman then asks if Ajin Guild has requested anything else, and Manager Woo responds that they have requested permission to handle nearby gates for the next week, but the exact reason for the request is not mentioned. Chairman Go agrees to the request and remarks that it is not a big problem. Suddenly, Manager Woo receives a call and excuses himself to answer it, while Chairman Go starts heading out for an appointment. Manager Woo answers answers the call, and the caller informs him that at the same school where the Great Orc Raid occurred, another gate has spawned in the schoolyard. The caller further reveals that a double dungeon has been discovered inside the gate. Manager Woo is shocked upon hearing this, and the caller then adds that Sung Jinwoo has already entered the dungeon. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the double dungeon where the statue begins to move. It spreads its wings, then smashes the stone slab and speaks, saying that Jinwoo has finally made it this far. Jinwoo wonders if it is okay to destroy the stone slab and questions if the so-called commandments ever meant anything. The architect responds with a creepy smile, saying that the commandments once meant something, but now they mean nothing. Jinwoo firmly asks if the architect is the one who called him to the dungeon. The architect responds with a yes. Jinwoo then asks if the architect is a magic beast. The architect replies that Jinwoo is asking the wrong questions. He starts clapping and suggests that instead of asking about him, Jinwoo should ask who he really is. The architect then announces the start of the test, and the statues begin to move, and the architect adds that if Jinwoo is still standing by the end of the test, he will reveal everything as a reward for completing the quest. As the statues start advancing, Jinwoo prepares to command his shadows, but to his surprise, the architect stops him by simply snapping his fingers. The architect explains that since this is a test, no cheating is allowed, and adds that he wants to assess Jinwoo alone and not the abilities of his servants. The system also notifies Jinwoo that he cannot purchase any items or use quest reward or level up rewards for status recovery. Jinwoo thinks to himself that he never expected all the cards in his hand to become useless. As one of the knights begins attacking him, Jinwoo remembers that he can still use his inventory and feels confident that he can defeat all the statues using his brute strength alone. As the knight's sword comes down toward him, Jinwoo grabs it midair and raises it before cracking it in half. He then throws the broken sword at the knight and dashes forward and crushes its head with a powerful strike. Another statue charges at him, but Jinwoo blocks the attack with his S-rank daggers. He leaps toward the statue and breaks it apart with his daggers. Suddenly, he notices a large arrow flying toward him, and Jinwoo swiftly breaks the arrow into two pieces and kicks one of the broken pieces toward the ranger statue's head, shattering it. Jinwoo realizes that he has been waiting for this moment for a long time and continues smashing through the rest of the statues with relentless force. The architect watches from the sidelines, impressed by Jinwoo's strength, and remarks that Jinwoo has achieved so much with his human body. He expresses admiration for how much Jinwoo has grown. While fighting the statues, Jinwoo notices that he can now clearly see all their movements, unlike before when the statues' attacks felt like teleportation. This realization boosts his confidence as he feels certain that he can still win even though the statues are incredibly powerful. The architect, observing Jinwoo's progress, comments that his growth is truly impressive, but declares that it is still too early for the test to end. Jinwoo suddenly hears something massive approaching him and turns to see the statue of God beginning to move toward him. The statue of God looks down at Jinwoo with an extremely creepy and sadistic smile, along with its glowing red eyes radiating malice. The architect announces with a sinister tone that it is time to worship the god. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Korean Hunters Association, where Matsumoto, the chairman of the Japanese Hunters Association, arrives to meet Chairman Go Gun-hee. Matsumoto slides a contract across the table, offering to give up the rights to all the essence stones from the Jeju Island raid in exchange for hiring Sung Jinwoo to handle the S-rank gate. Chairman Go laughs after hearing this and explains that Jinwoo is not an affiliate of the Hunters Association. Matsumoto responds that he is aware of the situation, but explains that he cannot contact Jinwoo without the help of the Hunters Association and requests a chance to negotiate with him. Chairman Go looks at the contract and thinks to himself that he cannot believe Matsumoto is willing to give up such an astronomical amount of money just to talk to Jinwoo. He wonders if this is because they lack the power to block the S-rank gate that recently spawned in Tokyo. Considering Jinwoo's performance, Chairman Go finds the offer reasonable and starts tapping on the contract. Speaking in Japanese, Chairman Go requests to continue the discussion without the interpreters. Matsumoto is shocked if Chairman Go can speak Japanese. Chairman Go explains that his father ran a small business in Japan when he was young. After the interpreters leave, Chairman Go directly asks Matsumoto if this is another one of his crafty schemes and suggests that he should stop now. Matsumoto angrily questions what Chairman Go means by that. Chairman Go responds that he has heard rumors the Blade Guild cut ties with Matsumoto and explains that it is obvious since the Blade Guild rejected funding and only accepted government subsidies. Chairman Go further remarks that the Blade Guild used to be the heart of the Japanese Japanese Hunters Association. But now that Goto Ryuji is gone, Matsumoto had been unable to control the S-rank hunters as he once did. He guesses that there might be a power struggle between the guilds as the Blade Guild has fallen apart, and comments that the Japanese Hunters Association is failing to manage the situation. Chairman Go warns Matsumoto that if the S-rank gate is not properly blocked, Matsumoto will need to take full responsibility. He explains that even though Goto Ryuji had malicious intentions, he was still the hunter who represented Japan. Chairman Go grabs a videotape and comments that all the deaths and mismanaged conflicts between the Japanese guilds are the result of Matsumoto's crafty plan, and that everything will fall on his shoulders. Matsumoto looks confused after seeing the tape, and Chairman Go explains that it is a recording from a camera connected to Goto's team receiver. Chairman Go furiously asks if Matsumoto thought he would not find out about his schemes, and warns that this is hardly the time to negotiate over essence stones. He adds that if this information becomes public, the people of Japan will face the consequences of Matsumoto's crooked plans. Matsumoto starts sweating as Chairman Go's words sink in. Chairman Go then crushes the camera and smashes the table, sending shockwaves through the room. He declares that he is not a cold-hearted person who would do something so cruel, and adds that he does not want all of Asia to plunge into crisis because of one man. Go tells Matsumoto that he should thank Jinwoo for this. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the double dungeon, where Jinwoo continues slicing through the statues. Jinwoo tries to dodge their attacks and brings out his S-rank daggers, and then, as the statue of God uses its heat vision ability to fire a beam of energy, Jinwoo uses his commander's touch to hold the statues in the path of the energy beam. After this, the commander's touch skill is upgraded to Commander's Authority. However, the beam of energy cuts through the statues, and Jinwoo quickly jumps away to avoid it. He remarks that he would not survive a direct hit from the beam at his current power level, and decides to focus on taking down the statue of God first. Then Jinwoo uses his dash skill to leap toward the statue of God. The statue raises its leg to crush him, but Jinwoo surprises it by dodging the attack and heads straight for its head. As the statue prepares to fire another laser beam, Jinwoo decides to use his speed combined with Commander's Authority to target its blind spot. He pulls the statue using Commander's Authority and remarks on the incredible strength of the gravitational pull. Even though he uses only a fraction of his power, the skill works on a statue this massive. Jinwoo realizes that the upgrade has made a significant difference. Sliding into the statue's blind spot, Jinwoo activates his mutilation skill and attacks it multiple times. To his shock, the S-rank daggers fail to cause any damage and only leave scratches on the statue. Jinwoo remarks that S-rank daggers usually cut through anything, but they are ineffective against the statue, and the statue of God smirks at Jinwoo's efforts. Jinwoo decides that if he cannot slice through the statue, he will rely on brute strength instead. He focuses on the small cracks in the statue, grabs hold of one, and delivers a powerful punch to its face. The architect, observing Jinwoo's strength, comments that he never expected Jinwoo to use such an attack against his marvelous creation. Jinwoo delivers another punch and declares that he will show the true power of level 103. With one final strike, the statue's face cracks open and it falls to the ground defeated. Jinwoo then uses Commander's Authority to finish off the remaining statues, smashing them to the ground. As the battle ends, Jinwoo realizes how much stronger he has become thanks to this fight. The architect begins clapping, impressed by Jinwoo's performance. Jinwoo demands that the architect keep his promise. The architect starts laughing and reveals that the test is not over, and declares that he is Jinwoo's final test. Suddenly, Jinwoo receives an urgent quest from the system, instructing him to defeat the architect within 10 minutes, or his heart will stop. Jinwoo asks the architect who he really is. The architect replies that this is still a silly question, but decides to give Jinwoo a name. As his mask begins to crack open, the architect introduces himself as the architect of the system. Meanwhile, the scene shifts outside the gate, where Manager Woo gathers 7 elite hunters from the association. He remarks that he knows they are no match for Sung Jinwoo, but he is preparing for the worst-case scenario. Suddenly, Manager Woo feels a powerful presence approaching and questions if anyone else is sensing it. Manager Woo wonders where this bone-chilling aura is coming from and describes it as a terrifying storm of mana. Manager Woo then asks if there are any major guilds on standby. One of the hunters informs him that the Hunters Guild is ready to raid. Manager Woo inquires about the 2 S-rank hunters in their guild, and the association member confirms that both Hae-In and Choi Jongin have agreed to participate in the raid. Manager Woo instructs them to place an emergency request with the Hunters Guild, as their cooperation is needed, and wonders what Jinwoo is up to this time. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to Jinwoo and the architect. Jinwoo starts sweating as he realizes he has only 10 minutes attempts to defeat the architect. The architect suddenly reveals 6 hands and charges at Jinwoo with incredible speed. He delivers a powerful punch that Jinwoo blocks with his hands, but the force is too strong and the impact hits Jinwoo's stomach, sending him crashing to the ground. The architect immediately follows up with another attack, but Jinwoo dodges the punch. While dodging, Jinwoo notices the architect using his other hands to try and crush him between them. Jinwoo manages to stop the full force of the attack. The architect is impressed by Jinwoo's strength and comments that Jinwoo is truly exceeding his expectations. Suddenly, the architect delivers a strong punch to Jinwoo's face and gives him a creepy smile. Jinwoo quickly recovers and retaliates with a powerful punch to the architect's face, sending him sliding away. The architect remarks that he is having so much fun fighting a human and admits that he never thought a mere human would be worthy of being his opponent. Jinwoo takes a slow breath and begins to understand the situation. Jinwoo realizes that the architect called him as soon as he leveled up to 101 because architect likely believed he would not be a match for him. Despite this, Jinwoo remains confident in his strength and tells the architect that he still has many questions to ask. Jinwoo begins by asking why the architect constructed the system and why he chose Jinwoo as his player and what is happening to the world right now. The architect responds that Jinwoo will not get his answers if he kills him and charges at him again. Jinwoo starts dashing away as he realizes that close combat puts him at a disadvantage. Jinwoo attempts to use his commander's authority, but to his surprise, the architect also uses the same skill. The architect questions if Jinwoo is planning to attack from a distance and remarks that it is a futile attempt. Jinwoo quickly realizes that the architect can use the same skills as him and that long-distance attacks are also pointless. The architect then states that it does not matter to him whether Jinwoo kills him or not and reveals that the answers to Jinwoo's questions are already predetermined. The architect grabs multiple weapons using all 8 of his hands, preparing for the next phase of the battle. Then Jinwoo questions how the architect is able to design all of this and how he is capable of granting him so much power. The architect responds that he did not choose Jinwoo and that he is against the idea of choosing him. He explains that he is simply the architect and moderator of the player breeding system and declares that his system design is perfect. Jinwoo realizes there is no time to waste and decides to attack the architect head-on. The architect leaps at Jinwoo and announces that he will go full force for the remaining time. Architect attacks with all his weapons, but Jinwoo dodges the assault, jumps away, and counters. The architect blocks all of Jinwoo's attacks and continues pressing forward. While fighting, Jinwoo notices that all his senses are becoming sharper. Jinwoo feels confident that he can complete the mission. Jinwoo slashes the architect's face and dodges his sword. The architect is shocked and wonders how Jinwoo is able to block all of his attacks, even though he is using his full powers. Architect also notices that Jinwoo is growing even stronger. Jinwoo continues his assault, slashing the architect multiple times and slicing off his hands. The architect, visibly surprised, remarks on how Jinwoo is capable of inflicting pain on him, even though he is in his fake body. Architect begins to understand why Jinwoo was chosen and starts screaming that Jinwoo is just a human. In desperation, he commands his statues to attack Jinwoo. With only around 3 minutes and 20 seconds left, Jinwoo sprints toward the statues and uses his commander's authority to crash them away and dashes straight at the architect. The statue of God tries to attack, but he dodges it and continues toward the architect, slicing off 2 of his hands. In response, the architect slashes Jinwoo with his sword. Suddenly, Jinwoo notices a tank-type statue and remembers it as the same one from before. Angered, he jumps at it and breaks its head with a powerful strike. Jinwoo immediately turns his attention back to the architect, slashes off his remaining hands, and delivers a devastating punch that crashes the architect to the ground. Jinwoo places his S-rank daggers at the architect's throat, and the architect admits his defeat and declares that the test is over. Then the architect mentions that all the answers to Jinwoo's questions are within himself. Jinwoo receives a system notification instructing him to retrieve the data stored in his memory. Confused by the notification, Jinwoo hesitates, but eventually accepts the memory retrieval. The system confirms that the data has been successfully retrieved, and a flash of light appears before him. Jinwoo finds himself transported into a different world and is shocked to see a massive number of magic beasts. All the magic beasts are looking up, and Jinwoo wonders what they are staring at. He turns around and is stunned to see countless gates in a purple sky. Realizing that this is not Earth, Jinwoo begins to worry and thinks about what would happen if all the magic beasts broke out at once, and concludes that humans would not stand a chance. However, Jinwoo notices that the magic beasts are are not after humans. Suddenly, one of the gates breaks open and a large group of silver soldiers emerges from it. Jinwoo quickly realizes that a war is about to begin. All the magic beasts rally together to fight the silver soldiers. The sounds of weapons clashing fill the air as pools of blood stain the battlefield. The war cries of the beasts turn into screams of agony as the silver soldiers dominate the battlefield with their overwhelming power. Just as the end seems near for the beasts, the silver soldiers suddenly stop one by one as Ashbourne appears. Ashbourne raises all the dead magic beasts as shadows using shadow extraction and enhances their stats with Monarch's domain. Jinwoo recognizes the skills being used and questions if Ashbourne is the Monarch of Shadows. He observes that the magic beasts who sacrifice their lives on the battlefield do not meet their end in death. Instead, they gain immortality as Ashbourne creates an army that will never die. Their blood grows dark and dense as they find newfound strength. Jinwoo watches Ashbourne summoning a massive number of shadows and comments that he is nothing compared to him. The fallen beasts rise as shadows and storm toward the silver soldiers, slashing through them. The black and silver armies become entangled in a fierce battle as explosions erupt and the ground shakes beneath them. Jinwoo remarks that the silver soldiers should have won the battle by a landslide, but the appearance of a single individual has completely turned the tide of the war. Ashbourne charges at the silver soldiers and slashes through them in seconds. His horse gallops at incredible speed as Ashbourne uses commander's authority to crush the silver soldiers. Jinwoo is shocked to see Ashbourne using another one of his skills. The shadow soldiers repeat the cycle of death and revival to wipe out their enemies. Wherever the Monarch of Shadows goes, a trail of destruction follows, and victory seems imminent for him. That is until they show up. Suddenly, the scene shifts back to the double dungeon where hunters have gathered to help Jinwoo. Choi Jong-in questions if Manager Woo is certain that Jinwoo is inside and remarks that he is sensing an immense amount of mana. Manager Woo confirms that he is sure of it. Hae-In, feeling the mana, comments that the energy coming from inside does not belong to Jinwoo and wonders who it could be and expresses her determination to finally witness the double dungeon. She decides to help Jinwoo as she feels indebted to him for his help during the Jeju Island raid. Manager Woo recalls Jinwoo mentioning that he was not the one to clear the double dungeon before and wonders why Jinwoo has returned and remarks that this cannot be a coincidence. As they open the door, Choi Jong-in is shocked to see the entire place completely wrecked and filled with statues. Manager Woo, seeing the scene, remarks that the stone sculptures and the statue of God actually exist. The architect notices their presence and with a creepy smile comments that he did not invite all of them. He calls their arrival an unexpected surprise. Everyone is stunned as they hear the architect speak in human language. The architect commands them to be silent as he declares that the king is in his slumber. The hunters notices Jinwoo frozen in place and wonders what he is doing there. To their horror, the architect suddenly slices one of the hunters in half. Hae-In is shocked by the architect's speed, and the architect confidently declares that all these strong humans will make excellent first offerings to the king. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to Jinwoo's memories, where Ashbourne looks into the sky and sees another portal. Suddenly, the portal cracks open and a large number of demons emerge from it. The demons belong to various clans, and Jinwoo notices the Radiru clan among them. Then another portal breaks open, and Rakan appears, transforming into a giant white wolf, accompanied by all the magic beasts. Another mysterious individual also shows up for the battle. Both Rakan and the mysterious figure stare at Ashbourne, and Ashbourne looks back at them with equal intensity. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the double dungeon, where Choi Jong-in urgently requests the healer to treat Myung-chul quickly and move the wounded hunters to the back. As the rest of the statues begin advancing toward them, the architect declares that anyone who is still alive by the time all his puppets collapse will be given the honor of witnessing the king's birth. The statue of God then starts attacking with its beam of energy. Choi Jong-in warns everyone to stay alert and moves to the statue's blind spot and uses his flame magic to attack it. He announces to the group to use this opportunity to destroy the stone statues. Manager Woo steps forward and punches the statue in the face, but the statue remains unfazed. Manager Woo realizes that the statue is far sturdier than he expected. Choi Jong-in assists by attacking the statue with his flame magic and comments that the statues have a high resistance to physical attacks. However, the magic flames also fail to cause significant damage, and Choi Jong-in realizes that the statues have high resistance to spell attacks as well. Ki-hoon then remarks that none of his provocation skills are working, and Hae-In adds that her basic psychokinetic spells are also ineffective against the statues. Choi Jong-in, understanding that they are running out of options, decides to wake Sung Jinwoo. He wonders if Jinwoo has been hypnotized and attempts to wake him by attacking him with a basic flame, believing it to be the only way. To his surprise, the architect intercepts the attack and charges at Choi Jong-in for trying to interrupt Jinwoo in his slumber. Other hunters rush to Choi Jong-in's aid and attack the architect. Choi Jong-in then calls out to Hae-In, urging her to wake Jinwoo while they handle the rest. Hae-In dashes forward toward Jinwoo, determined to bring him back. back. The scene shifts back to Jinwoo's memories, where he witnesses another war breaking out between the magic beasts and the shadow soldiers. Jinwoo watches as the shadow soldiers regenerate, no matter how many times they are destroyed. He thinks to himself that if those soldiers were his shadows, he would have run out of mana long ago. He realizes that Ashbourne possesses a limitless reservoir of mana. The demon clans and beast-type magic creatures continue to slaughter the shadow soldiers, and Jinwoo wonders why they are fighting each other when there seems to be no reason for it. He recalls that this war was supposed to be between the beasts and the silver soldiers. Jinwoo finally understands that Ashbourne is not on the side of the beasts and begins to suspect that there is an internal conflict between Ashbourne and the monarchs. As the battle nears its end, Ashbourne begins walking toward a mysterious figure. He speaks to the figure and mentions that they had a chance to win the war. He questions why the monarchs betrayed him. The individual responds that it is a shame and remarks that he could have eliminated Ashbourne. Ashbourne questions him again about the betrayal, but the mysterious figure only laughs. Enraged, Ashbourne uses Commander's authority to grab the figure. He cracks the figure's mask and crushes him. As Ashbourne looks into the figure's eyes, he realizes that he has seen those eyes before. He tries to recall where he has seen them and drops the figure after remembering that he is Demon King Bahram. Ashbourne wonders what Bahram is doing here. Jinwoo then notices his own hands and sees that they resemble Ashbourne's hands. He finally realizes that he is Ashbourne himself and wonders why he did not notice this earlier. Jinwoo feels something in his chest and looks down to see a black heart. He realizes that he now has 2 hearts. Suddenly, Jinwoo feels as though someone is watching him. He looks back and sees all the rulers staring at him. The system then notifies him that the playback of the retrieved data has ended. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the double dungeon where the architect observes Hae-In and finds her quite amusing. He taunts her to try harder and break free from his design. Hae-In uses her sword dance to attack, but the architect counters with his sword and slashes her. He laughs at her and comments that there will be no deviations after all. He remarks that humans never fail to disappoint him. The architect announces to everyone that the system he built can predict and respond to any outcome. He declares that their attempts are futile and will never destroy his creations. He mocks them and calls their efforts the best they can do. Hae-In charges at the architect and aims for his face, while Choi Jong-in insists that they need to wake Jinwoo as it is their only chance for survival. Hae-In runs toward Jinwoo, but the architect intercepts her. She dodges his attack, and the architect, impressed by her reflexes, calls her attempt not bad. He notices a shadow near Hae-In and remarks that the rules of this room do not allow such things to enter the dungeon. Architect realizes that the king has planted his soldiers on her and questions how they found this location and demands to know her relationship with Jinwoo. Hae-In boldly declares that she is Jinwoo's friend and that she came to rescue him. The architect realizes this is not Jinwoo's doing and offers her a chance to witness the glorious birth of one of the monarchs into this world. He adds that the rest of her friends must die here. Suddenly, the architect hears a voice and turns to see Jinwoo attacking him with a powerful punch that breaks his jaw. Jinwoo furiously demands to know what the architect has done to his body. Everyone feels relieved to see that Jinwoo has awakened. Jinwoo places his foot on the architect's face, and the architect shocked and realizes that Jinwoo is not the king. He questions why Jinwoo is here instead of the Shadow Monarch and wonders how he is able to maintain his consciousness with the Black Heart. Jinwoo feels the immense mana within him and understands that the Black Heart has significantly increased his power. The system notifies him that he has earned the title of Demon Hunter and that his mana has increased by 100,000. Jinwoo observes the architect's reaction and deduces 2 things. The first is that the Black Heart is not a product of the architect's scheme. The second is that it was never meant to strengthen his powers. Jinwoo remarks that the retrieved data has not provided him with all the answers, as he never got the chance to hear the full story. Jinwoo questions the architect about why he was against Jinwoo being the player. He demands to know what a player is and what the architect tried to do to him before. The architect, realizing the betrayal, concludes that the Monarch of Shadows has turned against him. He questions why Ashbourne did this and remarks that the other monarchs will not let him get away with it. Jinwoo brings out his daggers and warns the architect to answer his questions. The architect laughs and comments that Jinwoo is an unpredictable person and admits that he now understands why Jinwoo was chosen. Suddenly, the remaining statues with musical instruments which had not been attacking before begin to move. The architect confidently declares that if he dies, no one will be able to stop his statues. Jinwoo, unfazed, questions what will happen if he kills both the architect and his statues. The architect, shocked, warns Jinwoo that he is the architect of the system and that if Jinwoo kills him, he will revert to being an E-rank hunter. Jinwoo smirks at the threat and remarks that he has already considered this possibility. He confidently states that the system will not fall apart just because its creator dies. The architect attempts to manually override the system, but to his shock, the system rejects his admin access. He wonders why the system is denying him control. Jinwoo, recalling his memories, remarks that he once thought the system was using him, but now he has decided to use the system instead. He declares that he will swallow the entire system. Jinwoo adds that he is fortunate the system's design is full of flaws and proceeds to kill the architect with multiple attacks at once. As the architect dies, he makes a final prediction. He warns that when the pillars of fire supporting the skies are erected, an unavoidable death will come for Jinwoo. Jinwoo looks back at the architect and calmly responds that so be it. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the outside of the gate where everyone is waiting for the hunters to return. One of the Courage Guild hunters remarks that it has been over an hour since the Hunters Guild went inside and wonders what is taking them so long. He admits that if their guild had gone inside instead of the Hunters Guild, they would have been completely wiped out. After a few minutes, they see some hunters coming out of the gate. One of the Courage Guild hunters sees how beat up they are and is shocked. He remarks that he cannot believe the elite hunters of the Hunters Guild are in such a state and wonders what could have happened inside a C-rank gate to leave them like this. Manager Woo approaches the Courage Guild hunter and requests his help in transporting the casualties. The Courage Guild member is stunned to hear that there are casualties. Jinwoo steps out of the gate and thinks to himself that the real architect is somewhere else. He reflects on how he got some answers, but never expected the architect to stick around long enough to tell him everything. Manager Woo informs Jinwoo that 20 of the highest-ranking hunters have died in action. He assures Jinwoo that if a dungeon break had occurred, the damage would have been unimaginable. Manager Woo questions if Jinwoo attempted to clear the double dungeon all by himself. Jinwoo responds that he only intended to report the double dungeon and never expected anyone to come and help him. He adds that he feels responsible for the deaths of the 20 hunters and thanks the Hunters Guild and the surveillance team for ensuring his survival. Manager Woo explains that it is standard practice for the surveillance team to be notified whenever an S-rank hunter takes action. He admits that it was his decision to request the cooperation of the Hunters Guild, but acknowledges that the results have been tragic. Manager Woo asks Jinwoo how he knew about the double dungeon. Jinwoo replies that the dungeon called out to him and that he received a message telling him to come. Manager Woo requests to see the message. Jinwoo explains that it is in his head and only he can see it. Manager Woo is confused by Jinwoo's response and thinks that Jinwoo must be joking, especially considering the number of deaths. He admits to himself that he cannot understand Jinwoo, at least not with common sense. Hae-In is worried about Jinwoo and asks if he is alright. Jinwoo confidently responds that he is fine, but quickly changes his answer and admits that he is tired and about to collapse. Hae-In moves to support Jinwoo from falling to the ground. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Tokyo, where a large amount of mana crystals is being transported to the S-rank gate. Yuri observes the operation and mentions that there is a total of 200,000 tons of mana crystal. He confidently states that this amount should be more than enough for his magic circle to hold the gate for an entire year. Yuri explains that once he begins the process of building the magic barrier around the gate, it will start drawing mana from the crystals, and the magic circle will become self-sufficient. Suddenly, Yuri senses something strange. The association members ask if there is a problem. Yuri responds that the barrier is perfect, but admits that he senses a strong presence nearby. Yuri calls out to the being and demands that it show itself. One of the members remarks that no human would dare to be out on the streets with a dungeon break set to occur tomorrow. Yuri boldly responds that he never said it was a person. Meanwhile, Sung Il-won watches everything from the top of a building and remarks that Yuri has sharp senses. He notes that this is not surprising considering the source of Yuri's powers. He comments that everything is going according to the plan and that the tragedy is on its way. The military surrounds the area with tanks, and Kanai observes the scene and remarks that modern firearms are highly ineffective against beasts and questions the point of mobilizing an army. Sugimoto explains that if Yuri's strategy fails, they will need someone to buy time for the frontline hunters to prepare for an attack. Kanai responds that the soldiers are nothing more than human shields. Sugimoto agrees and adds that as long as they are stationed at the front lines, they are no different from the humans. He further remarks that this shows how helpless humans are in the face of pure destruction. Yuri looks at the mana crystals and confidently states that everything is going according to his plan and declares that he will handle the gate by himself. Yuri boasts that it would be great if he could single-handedly bring down an S-rank gate. He then remarks that there is another hunter who better fits that title and admits that he should not be overambitious. Yuri starts drinking alcohol, and the association member angrily protests that Yuri should not be drinking. Yuri responds that he is just trying to calm his nerves as he is about to put on the greatest show and calls for a toast. Yuri then asks how many S-rank hunters are on standby. The member responds that there are a total of 15 S-rank hunters. Yuri remarks that they have only a small small audience to witness his powers. He further asks if any American hunters are joining the operation. The member explains that another S-rank gate has spawned in Maryland and adds that many other S-rank gates have appeared in other major countries as well. Yuri realizes that all the countries are struggling with a shortage of good hunters. Suddenly, the gate shatters. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to Jinwoo, who is in a hospital. Jinho rushes in to check on him and starts crying as he admits that he was worried Jinwoo had died. Jinwoo asks what happened to him, and Jinho explains that Jinwoo has been asleep for 3 whole days. Jinwoo is shocked to learn that he has been unconscious for so long. He thinks to himself that he must have built up extreme fatigue from the fight. He realizes that he has not taken a break in a long time. Jinwoo remembers the war shown to him by the architect and finds that he cannot get it out of his head. Suddenly, Jinwoo recalls the S-rank gate that spawned in Tokyo and asks Jinho for an update. Jinho turns his head to the side with a sad expression. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the S-rank gate in Tokyo, where everyone is in disbelief as they watch giant magic beasts emerge from the gate. They are shocked to see that these beasts are the same ones that usually appear as bosses for the highest level of A-rank gates. Yuri observes the giant beasts and confidently remarks that this will be an easy task. He uses his barrier magic by drawing mana from the crystals. The giant beast breaks through the barrier with a single hit from its weapon. Yuri remains confident and comments that they can break through the barrier. To his surprise, the giant beast grabs the barrier, smashes it, and slices it apart with its weapon.